Fair use.
So tell
Fair
us
use.
how you got started in journalism and your journey to Cosmopolitan magazine.
Okay. Well, I went to the University of Missouri School of Journalism, and I actually, while I was there, I wanted to be a magazine writer. And while I was there in my magazine writing class, we had to choose a magazine to invest, just look at it and see how would you sell to this magazine. And I chose Cosmopolitan because Cosmo was the hottest women's magazine in the nation at that time. And I came away saying, I told my journalists in training, I said, I have to say these articles in this magazine, these stories in this magazine look like they're made up. I said, they're too packed.
Notice that this woman is saying that she wanted to work for Cosmopolitan because it was the best magazine, but she said as she started reading that she, as a journalist, started thinking or realizing that these articles are made up. The magazines were not reflecting the reality that she and other people were living.
And when I graduated from the college and went to New York City, I applied for a job in the New York Times. It was just said it was a magazine. It didn't tell me what. And when I got there, it was Cosmo. So I got there and I beat out.
All right, you stop complaining. So anyway, let's see, let's do it this way. Maybe it's too low over there. Let's do it over here. It's not time stamped, but she got to Cosmopolitan.
The Missouri School of Journalism, and I was the hottest women's magazine in the nation at that time. And I came away saying, I told my journalists in training, I said, I have to say these articles in this magazine, these stories in this magazine look like they're made up. I said, they're too packed. And when I graduated from the college and went to New York City, I applied for a job in the New York Times. It was just said it was a magazine. It didn't tell me what. And when I got there, it was Cosmo. So I got and I beat out like 18 other people, and I got the job. And while I was on Cosmo's staff, I found out that I had been right. Those articles were made up. Those stories about these women living these happy-go-lucky sex lives and hopping into bed with all these men, they were just made up.
You hear that? Back when all it was TV and magazines, when the magazines were the internet of the day, the biggest magazine for women was making up lies, telling those good lies, telling women lies to sell products. Ladies, this is where it started. This is where your mother and your grandmother got their internet. This is their YouTube, their Instagram of the day. They were lies, not true, made up.
Because remember, this was in the early 1970s, and there weren't that many women doing that stuff in those days. Or if they weren't talking about it. So.
Absolutely. And that's, so this is so dear to my heart because so much of what I do is talk about this propaganda. And we're going to get into really a good conversation about propaganda and what that is. And I know that you did that in your book, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, you land in Cosmopolitan. In fact,
propaganda, ladies, that you can have it all. Propaganda.
I want to read just a little bit from your book, even though we haven't quite gotten into that yet, because I think it sort of picks up where you just left off on your story.
Okay.
You wrote, I can give you no justification for what I did in my former life. I will only say this in my weak defense. I was a young woman searching for truth, freedom, and meaning in the world, but I had no clue where to find them. I grew up as a small-town Iowa girl and passionately desired to escape from the prison of small-mindedness I perceived around me. And thus it was that after graduating from the University of Missouri School of Journalism, I found myself one day in New York City. And I was seated across a large wooden desk from Roberta Ashley, articles editor of Cosmopolitan magazine. Cosmo insiders seemed to know things I didn't know, secrets that made them successful in the world. My mind burned to know what they knew.
Fair use.
For a small-town Iowa girl, Cosmo's big-time glamour, success, and prestige were intoxicating. In my mind, the job, assistant to the articles editor of Cosmopolitan, was a small-town girl's dream come true. Only later would I realize how dark the dream had become.
Stop asking 11 million questions. Stop asking about the video. Pay attention. Please. See why y'all didn't do well, and some of y'all may not have done well in school. When the broadcast is going, you pay attention. If you need all that shit later, come to the description. Listen.
Eventually, it would lead to a cacophony of mixed, confused messages in our culture about women, work, sex, marriage, and relationships. Errors that have divided our nation and continue to haunt us to this day. So that's what I meant when I said that brings me to basically the work that I do every week. So I'm really fascinated by your story. And I want to start with talking about the owner, I guess you call her the owner of Cosmopolitan, right? Helen Gurley Brown.
Editor-in-chief.
Editor-in-chief.
No, Hearst magazines were the owner of it. Hearst Corporation.
Oh, sorry. Was she okay? So she ran it, I guess we should say.
Yeah,
yes.
She's the editor-in-chief. Yeah.
Okay. And she was a childless woman. She was married for a long time, which was interesting, but she did.
The editor-in-chief of the magazine that sold all this propaganda was a woman who was married for 50 years, but no kids. So I find it interesting that a lot of times people come over there, how can you speak for this? How can you speak for that? How can you do this? How can you do that? When at the genesis, at the birth of all this stuff, listen to the woman who hired people to make up stories, to sell magazines, to sell advertising, to get women to buy stuff.
Not have any children. And her ultimate message, you said, was that, of course, it was the same as the sexual revolutions, which is that sexual liberation will set you free, and motherhood essentially gets in the way of that freedom. And so this magazine is really sort of a manifestation of the sexual revolution. Yes?
Oh, it was. It was a Playboy clone. This was a Playboy for young women.
Cosmopolitan magazine was a Playboy magazine clone. If you think so, pay attention to what she just said. A Playboy magazine clone. Playboy was not written for journalism. It was written to sell products.
Gurley Brown had even gone to Hugh Hefner and gotten some of his writers and some of his agents that he worked with. So this was, remember this, she turned Cosmo. Cosmo had been a general interest magazine, and she turned it into a sex rag, what I call a sex rag, mid-1960s. Yeah.
What would you say the overall message that she wanted to sell was?
Hard work and sex without the kids will set you free.
What was the message she wanted to sell? Hard work and sex without the kids will set you free. Hard work and sex without the kids will set you free. Hard work, sex without the kids will set you free. What does your husband have to say about that? What? I would not choose to be. Marriage, I'm
a PhD.
Hard work and sex without kids will set you free. What does your husband have to say about that? What does your husband have to say about that? What? Marriage, I would never choose to be. What? I'm
a PhD.
Sex without the kids leads to what? There we go. Birth of the PhD.
Okay, so very, very pro unmarried sex and very anti motherhood. Yes?
And very pro hard work. She had worked very hard, and she thought it was her hard work that had gotten her where she was.
Well, and of course that sounds very innocuous, hard work. Not many people would argue with hard work, but you're saying hard work at the exclusion of everything else, I think. Is that what you mean?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Hard work and sex without the kids.
Right. Got it.
Right. It was a double whammy.
Got it. So how were you taught to sell this message?
How were you taught to sell the message of hard work, no marriage, free sex, no kids? How are you taught to sell this message to women in order to get them to buy a magazine, to buy products and services from advertisers?
Well, Helen Gurley Brown had actually written up a list of rules on how to write stories for Cosmo. And I can give you some of these rules. I call them propaganda because propaganda is what is propaganda? It's half truth, limited truth, and truth out of context. There's always a little bit of truth, just like we were saying, nothing wrong with hard work, right?
Right.
So there's always a little truth in propaganda, but it's the part that's not true that gets you.
Right.
Here's, for example, here I kept that list of rules for 50 years. And when I was writing Subverted, the book that you're reading from, I couldn't find that list of rules. And then about 2 years ago in the garage, in a box, I found it. So I had the whole list of rules, and I can rewrite from those and should tell you what they said.
This woman was given rules as a young, bright-eyed college grad on how to sell articles that advertisers would want to put their dollars behind to sell products. If you've ever watched Mad Men, this is Mad Women again. And you wonder where it came from? Pay very close attention.
I'm a PhD.
Okay.
Oh, wow. I didn't. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got the rules. So propagandists, as I say, they make up stories. That's the important thing to say. Here's something I'll read to you. Since most of the women were not part of the sexual revolution at that time, I say, well, here's how we're going to make up these stories about these ordinary women who she called civilians. I guess
she called these women civilians. So, what is Cosmo? A military operation? Yeah. Propaganda. Civilians.
Okay, I guess the sexual revolutionaries were in the army and the rest of us were civilians.
I came from advertising, right? By the way.
But she writes,
I've heard about this already.
Try to locate some of the buildings, restaurants, nightclubs, parks, streets, as well as entire case histories in cities other than New York, even if you deliberately have to plant them elsewhere. Most writers live in New York. Well, at that time they did. 92% of our readers do not. But by making up these women and planting them in places like Cleveland and Albuquerque and Des Moines, of course, we made the sex revolutions, then quite shocking mores, seem a lot more widespread and acceptable than they actually were.
You heard that right. Make up stories, find some stuff in local areas to give it a little bit of credibility. And even if you don't know one, plant her in Cleveland or Oklahoma City or any place that's out of New York City or LA, because, most people don't resonate with that. 92% of our audience ain't here. And sell this concept of the strong, independent, I don't need no woman.
I'm a PhD.
So the unspoken message to the young reader was, everybody else is doing this. Why are you being such a stick in the mud?
So I'm smiling over here because that's exactly been my point for 20 years, is that this message that's coming through to young women is only servicing this small minority of women who live this way. And it's presented as though it's the norm, which then affects the everyday person because they think that what they're seeing is the norm. So they're making decisions based on, this is your whole point, a lie.
Right.
And they're miserable.
You're making decisions based on a lie because you've been sold to. So when you go to these channels that tell you that, they're just lying, they're just making up that stuff, they're just angry. Who hurt you? No, these are two older white women. One that was right there on the ground zero. And I'm going to put a link down in the description so you can go watch the entire interview yourself. Because she's at the end of her life. She's coming clean. She wrote a book called Subverted after she converted to Catholicism, and she just spilled all the beans. And I'm not going to play all of it, but we're going to talk about this. Was put together by about 57 people in a room somewhere. 57 people decided to sell this concept for commercial gain.
Exactly. Because this is a false way to live. Here's another one. She gives. Remember now, they tell these stories, and they make these stories up as if about women who are a lot like you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're feeling insecure, and
Get
who
the
isn't
likes up, or I'm
sometimes,
gonna
Right.
go to on your mission.
and you're young and you want to be successful and stuff like this, then these stories are appealing to you. And here's another one. Here's a rule on here's a story that Helen actually had written in these rules about an imaginary girl named Erica, who appeared. And this story appeared in an article entitled "One Man Is Not Enough." Okay.
Here comes the birth of the sexual liberation. One man is not enough. Here comes the birth of Frankenstein. It's alive!
All right, here's the beginning of it. She had been living for a definition of feminine nature that was doing her an injustice.
Say that again. Wait, read that sentence again for me.
Had been living for a definition of feminine nature that was doing her an injustice. Okay?
Uh-huh.
Locking herself into a monogamous relationship, she was with a married man. She was more often than not left with no man at all. The elusive fellow in question did plan to marry her as soon as he could work his wife around to getting a divorce. So is Cosmo's advice not to sleep with married men? No, 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 no. Cosmo's advice is to sleep not with one married man, but with several. So in her best-selling book, Sex and the Single Girl, here's what Helen.
How many times you've heard about making yourself a side chick to a high value man or a man with money? Y'all didn't think y'all thought y'all came up with this idea? No, it was sold to you. It was sold to you, made all right.
Wrote. It seems to me the solution is not to rule out married men, but to keep them as pets. While they are using you to varnish their egos, you use them to add spice to your life. I say them advisedly. One married man is dangerous. A potpourri can be fun. So there you go.
I have a question for you. How did you, I guess, rectify her message and the fact that didn't you say she was married for like 50 years to one man?
Yes, she was. In fact, she said that she was married to David Brown, who was a very famous producer at the time. He was a producer of Jaws and Driving Miss Daisy. She said if David ever had an affair, she'd kill him.
So where do you think this came from? This desire to tell people to live a life that she clearly wasn't even living herself. Like, what is that?
She had been a very successful copy editor in California, copywriter.
Here it goes. Pay attention.
California. She was a advertising copywriter, and this was ad copy. She was selling the Cosmo lifestyle because that's what she was using to sell products in the magazine. Now,
there you go. They made up an entire lifestyle to sell to women, to sell ads in a magazine. Ladies, this is where it came from. This is a big part of where it came from.
let me explain. If you understand how propaganda works, Edward Bernays wrote a book called Propaganda. He is considered the father of public relations, and he wrote that book titled Propaganda in the early 1900s, in the 1920s. He thought propaganda was a really good thing, but he explained, how do you sell pianos to the middle class? Because a piano is a pretty high ticket item. You sell a piano by selling the music room. You have all of these beautiful magazines with these very successful people, famous rich people who have music rooms in their house. And once you've sold the middle class on the idea of having a music room, they'll just think, I got to have a piano. You see? So you change the whole person's whole world around them in a way that makes them want to buy this stuff. So how do you sell beautiful clothes, cosmetics, hair products, contraception, abortion, singles travel, all these things that are in these women's magazines, high fashion women's magazines? You sell them by selling the Cosmo lifestyle.
I'm a PhD.
You can say cosmopolitan has nothing to do with you, but yes, you have the internet today and OnlyFans because of Playboy. You have the kind of rap music and stuff you have today back when NWA was going to jail for F the Police, and 2 Live Crew were being put in jail for songs that would be very tame today. This is where it came from. It was propaganda. It was all to sell stuff. The Cosmo lifestyle. And this is what happens.
Once you've convinced a young woman that this is the lifestyle she wants to live, she'll think, I just have to have all these other products. And so Cosmo was extraordinarily successful. You have to remember, in the early 1970s, when I went there, it was the hottest women's magazine in the nation. And also had, advertisers were coming out of the woodwork trying to get into Cosmo. And so that was such a successful magazine that you see so many women's fashion magazines today that are following the Cosmo lead, if you will.
I have a quote here where you talked about propaganda in this way. You said, propaganda cuts off the democratic discourse, blocks genuine dialogue, and keeps the public from participating in reality. By the time the propagandists' deceptions are exposed to the twisted truth they are, untold and irreversible damage has often been done to the external order of human existence.
Now we're going to skip another part of this because I want to get into talking about how the sexual revolution and all this was married together. And I'm give me a minute, and I want you to listen to how this all comes together.
You set out, yes, you were blowing the whistle on all the cultural propaganda about divorce and uncommitted sex and all that stuff. But you wanted to answer the question, correct me if I'm wrong, of how the sexual revolution and the women's movement became commingled. And you said, quote, in the beginning, the women's movement and the sexual revolution were distinctly separate. And then you wanted to show in this book how
feminism, the women's movement, ERA, and sexual revolution were two different things. Phyllis Schlafly, there's a whole history of this. It's like they were the Bloods and the Crips, two different gangs. But then all of a sudden, something happened and they became one.
Oh, they got intertwined.
Right. When I was sitting at my little blue desk at Cosmo in 1971, the women's movement was in full swing at that time. And Betty Friedan, Helen Gurley Brown would have loved for Betty Friedan to write for Cosmo, but Betty Friedan called Cosmo quite obscene and quite horrible. So you had the women's movement on one side, launched by Betty Friedan with the feminine mystique in 1963. And then you had Helen Gurley Brown, who launched the sexual revolution magazine Cosmo in 1965. By the time I got there, I saw that they were two radically separate movements. So how did they get joined together? That was the question people started to ask me. And a friend of mine said, was it abortion? I looked at her and I thought, I think it was. But I didn't know, you see. That's why it took me so long to write that book. I had to find out how did abortion get inserted in the women's movement? Because abortion is anti-motherhood, anti-woman. It's anti-woman. So how did that get joined together? Well, it took me many, many years. And if we hadn't had Dr. Bernard Nathanson, who, as you know, was an abortionist who later became a pro-life activist, he became a Catholic eventually. But Dr. Bernard Nathanson had spilled the beans by telling the world that he and a man named Lawrence Lader, who were co-founders of what's now NARAL Pro-Choice America, had convinced Betty Friedan to insert abortion in the women's movement. If he hadn't told
the women's movement. So when people tell you that it has nothing to do with all these different things, yeah, it does. And she goes on to describe how these two different ideologies basically had come together and inserted that word into the women's movement and then changed the words to reproductive choice. Because there is no way you can tell women to postpone marriage, have sex without babies, without making work, and free sex not a big deal. That's what goes on. And so later on, Suzanne reads a section from Sue Ellen's book about the sexual revolution, where the women's movement became intertwined with the popular sphere of young women that believing liberation means going to college, pursuing a career, postponing marriage and motherhood, and to be as sexually active as possible with no strings attached. This has led to so much pain for women. Now, let's bring it all home. That's the birth of the PhD. That's the birth of all this. Telling women, hey, it's your right. It's liberation. The evil patriarchy. All that stuff. Well, let's fast forward it, shall we? Let's fast forward and see what happens later on. I'm going to play something from a clip from a channel here on YouTube. Shout out to them. I'm going to use audio from them. It's Grapevine. And I'm going to start right here.
I'm going to first start to talk about the
fair use.
The statistics that come out saying that 70% of black women are single. Is that a myth? Do you think that's true? Who wants?
This was 4 years ago. Now, that woman who was one of the writers, major writers, she left Cosmo in '83. But the damage was done. She talks about how she finally started coming to terms with the damage she had caused in 2003 when she converted to Catholicism and started seeing all these women living these Sarah Jessica Parker Sex and the City lives and seeing all the damage that it caused with women not doing what she, basically what they were sold to do. And she said, I had to come clean. Understand, this woman, the writer of this, was married for 40 years. And the woman that hired her, married 50 years, out promoting having sex with married men. But she said, if you try to sleep with my husband, I kill you. Listen.
I think it's unbelievably high. Okay. But do you see that in your everyday life, that that's the case?
Every time I try to holler at a girl, that must be extremely high. I believe that's pretty true and accurate.
The stat they're talking about is the out of wedlock, or how many women are married or not married. And you're going to see that, well, let's just get right to it. What typically happens when women tend to hear stats that they don't like? They're starting to question the stat. Here we go.
Between the ages of 18 to 34.
I researched before. I'm not sure if it's single or unmarried, but we'll link it at the bottom. Go ahead, Sarah. Wait, I'm sorry. One person at a time. Go ahead, Sarah.
It is unmarried.
It's
and
unmarried.
The statistic is actually skewed. It's 70% of black women between the ages of 18 to 34
are unmarried.
Unmarried.
Imagine 18-year-olds.
Which that's what a lot of people are saying, that it's a skewed statistic because.
Of course, anytime you hear something that you don't like, we're going to question the stat. Pay very close attention to what's about to happen.
Most people from the age of 18 to 34
are unmarried. But I think also, like, back in the day, like, people were getting married at 23. Like, my mom got married at 23.
Your average American nowadays gets married at 20. Your average woman gets married at 26 or 27. And your average male, I want to say, gets married at like 28 or 29.
Okay, so knowing that, do you feel like there's like a stigma as a black woman when you're like single, or just because of all these studies that come out, all these videos, all these questions about?
fair use. The stigma that goes along, I'll let her go ahead and say this.
Yeah. The focus is more so on black women and we're not looking.
Yeah, we're going to go on to the next part. They're going to go in to talk about the stigma and all this other kind of stuff. Honestly, bunch of pandering instead of dealing with the reality of what goes on.
As a whole, like.
Shared degree.
Here we go.
I'm sorry, Sarin, just let Sakina go.
I was going to say that I think that the focus of women, between ages 18 to 34 is also very different. Like, you don't finish your degree until you're, 20, 22. And then if you go on to grad school, now you're 24, you're 26, and then you're a working professional. So I think the focus of millennials, especially black millennials, is very different. We're traveling, we're working in corporate environments, we're entrepreneurs, so I think...
Suzanne reads a section from Sue Ellen's book, talks about how the sexual revolution and the women's movement became intertwined in the popular sphere that young women believed that liberation means to go to college, pursue a career, postpone marriage, motherhood, become sexually as active as possible with no strings attached, and how this has led to so much pain for women. Traveling, turning up.
Some of them is turning up. So I think the focus is different and not necessarily on getting married right now.
But what I will say is that when I go into certain situations and I see my white female counterparts, everybody has a ring.
That's it. You can say what you want to, but you go around and you see your non-black counterparts and they're doing all the stuff that black women are doing, plus they got a ring. Plus they got a ring. Plus they got a ring.
No matter if they're starting at 24, and it's not necessarily the case with my black female counterpart.
Well, I agree
Go ahead, Donovan.
I agree with Ashley.
Of course, here we have the best in simp talk. And this is another thing. Here comes the panda bear to go in and question all the other stuff. And that is what has happened. Panda bears were big 4 years ago. But panda bears aren't helping because panda bears ain't got nothing for you except more pandering. The reality is what just happened.
Okay, Sarin, did you want to say something?
A few things.
Okay.
So to kind of piggyback off what you said, which is what I was already going to say, once black women hit 34 and above, the number actually rises dramatically. I think it's 80%.
You better come with the
Or
statistics.
90%.
Yes.
Why is it? I do.
This woman just said that, those skewed stats, but once they go from 34 to 35, the number of unmarried black women dramatically rises to 80 or 90% married. And this other woman, as on cue, says, you better come with the stats. The propaganda has worked. 80 to 90% of black women are married over age 35. And you got women in here saying, the numbers are wrong. The stats are wrong.
For anyone that doesn't know, I'm on YouTube and actually did a video on this. So 80%, or it might even be higher than that, 90% of black women 34 and above are married or have been married at least once.
Okay.
Going off what you said about white women getting married at a younger age, 50 or 60% of first marriages that when you get married before 25 end in divorce. So people are getting married younger, but they have a higher chance of divorcing.
How many times do you hear women who have a problem with my platform parroting this stuff right here? This woman says, I did a video on it. A wrong video telling 30. So don't worry. When you're all the way up in no man's land, all of a sudden, the marital numbers just automatically jump to 80, 90%. 8 or 9 out of 10 black women all of a sudden get married when just a year before, 70 to 80% of you were unmarried. And they didn't even think to question the number because it felt good to hear it. And no one pushes back on this. 4 years ago, there was no one to push back on this. I'm going to leave a link in the description. Go look in the comment section. And it's littered with women destroying men. Ladies, the propaganda worked to where you even got women saying, oh yeah, the numbers are off.
Get married below 30, like there's a much higher chance. And I know a lot of white girls that do get married they get married at 23 and they're divorced by 29, and then they're on to their second marriage.
To the second marriage.
Yeah,
that's true.
And in terms of who black men want to date and stuff like that, as of 2014, 86% of black men that were married to black women. So you actually
can we just clap about that? Yeah, I love it.
Listen to the selective hearing. 70% aren't married between 18 and 30. We're going to question the stat. But automatically, between over age 35, they get married at a rate of 80 to 90%. And then when they are married, they're marrying black women. Yay! When you look around this room and all of them are single, and I would be willing to, and I would love for Grapevine to respond. I would love to hear how many women from this platform in 2016 are married since this video dropped. Back then, men could not say anything because they would be shouted down. But you could just heard, just in that much of listening to that, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. But let somebody tell you what you want to hear, and you'll clap on cue.
And guys, that brings us to the end of today's video. Thanks for watching. More respect on the legend Kevin Samuels. This guy was fantastic at exposing these ratchet mindset women, and there is no one that did it better than him, and still there is no one that does it better than Kevin Samuels. So I think giving him the credit that he deserves, I think pretty much, answers everything now. And talking about people always going after Kevin Samuels, even to date, we still have people that come under these videos to hate on this guy. Sometimes even we should not say everything here, right? But people come to say things, oh, it's good that he died. I mean, how crazy can you be? Just listen to this video. Just pay attention to this video. How many women would not testify on this issue that it is haunting them? It is something that has, if you are a lady and you've paid attention to this video, you realize that these companies, Cosmopolitan and all these kind of companies, just milk the shit out of black women, money out of black women. I'm not much concerned about other races because they still doing better when it comes to marriages and relationship. That's why I'm only focusing on black women, right? If you're a lady and someone tells you opening your legs for a man that has no commitment to you is empowering, or it's just okay, it's normal, it makes you more valuable, I think that person need to be arrested, because it is crime against women. When you tell women that, I will say it's a crime against them, because women are the easy one to manipulate, right? If you pay attention, everything that will have to come to light at some point in life that maybe it was a lie, it is always against women, because they are not logical sound like we are. So oftentimes they will just deceive them with these kind of, they just sell them some sort of dream, right? And they have it in their mind that, oh, wow, as they are telling me this, if I happen to believe it, I can also be able to live like this person, that sort of thing. So, because pay attention, how many people realize when black women come on this platform and being asked what they're doing, they'll tell you, oh, they are on some kind of job and also planning to open some business. And that mostly includes some sort of real estate or some kind of bundle, selling hair and or weaves, those kind of things. And because they've seen a couple of people doing it and actually succeeding, they always kind of equated that, if someone is able to do it, then I'll be able to do it. And that is a great mindset, but the stats still show what it shows, regardless of whether or not we still have women that are opening business, trying to run business and all those things. The stats are what they are. So that tells you that not all of you having this mindset will win. But when they kind of sell that kind of image to women, you sleep with a bunch of men, and on top of that, there is always some incentives that incentivize these women to do those things because they've been pushed with so much money for you to be able to live the lifestyle that is going to, push the next lady to come on. So that's how it goes. It's almost like if I'm preaching something to you and I'm kind of living in a kind of luxurious way, right? More likely, whatever I'm selling to you, I'm more than likely going to buy. And that thing that I'm selling to you is telling you that when you kind of do what I'm telling you to do, you are going to have the results that I have. And oftentimes we see black women coming online being bitter, right? I mean, oftentimes black men, that's what they typically do. But these are the people that are in charge of your bitterness. If you're a lady and you are over 30 years old and you're single and you think it's the reason that men are oppressing you or men don't want to commit to you or anything like that, you just pay attention to this video. It is this video that has done you guys damage. When you are with a guy and the guy tell you, I'm going to go out there, cheat, or a guy will go out there and have sex with another lady, and you also think that going out to have sex with another man is equal. And that is why you guys are fucked up and your situations are not getting better, because you try to act like a man and that man finds out, you done. You done. When they talk about black men marrying black women, the women were clapping, kind of so excited. Why is it that they kind of always feel intimidated by white women, or they kind of always have fear? And it's mostly because of white women. Then the thing is this: what black women are not willing to give to black men, white women are willing to give it to us. So they are so kind of afraid, to the point that when they see a black man with a white woman, they start being insulting towards this black lady for no reason, for whatever reason. And the reason is mostly because a black man choose a white lady. So if you're an average black woman, you say you don't want an average black man, and a white woman is saying, I love, average men, and I'm with one, and you get a problem with that. Black women just have a whole lot of problem that they need to be dealing with. It is what it is. When I see women that encounter black men with other races of women, it's almost shocking to me. It's almost like they are entitled to black men. We cannot claim ownership of you, but you always want to claim ownership of us. No, that's not how it goes. You want free sex market? That's what you got. And I don't care what people will be saying in this comment section. Whether or not I hate my mama or something like that, I don't give a fuck. As long as black men, you can get someone that is willing to understand, follow you out there, I think you are good. Because we can't just look at our women or sit down there and watch our women allow the community to die. Because when you get married to other races, still you are going to reproduce a black child. You are bringing us a black child to the community. So I support whatever decision you take, being it taking a white lady, whatever the case is. I'm all down. I'm all down for it. Choose what is just going to make your life comfortable. So if black women, are kind of feeling insecure, white women being around, they know white women are more than likely always going to serve their husband, which is black men. And that is their biggest fear, because they're kind of like, black man ain't shit, and there is someone that is treating him so special. That is always something that they just don't want it to happen. They don't want black men. If it is a white man with a black woman, it's kind of always okay. Go with what your heart desires. But when it comes to black men with other races, hey, there is a problem. They were clapping when they were favoring black men wifing up black women. They were clapping. So what does that tell you? They kind of always feel insecure, especially white women hanging around. I think women, oftentimes, they say, I was young and dumb. And even, I will argue that oftentimes some will be old and still dumb. Because we still have people that are older, 40, 30 years, that still believe in this shit, that cosmopolitan shit that they brought to, they brought into our community. Because I don't care about other races, because they have their own problems to solve. We also got our own problem, and one of our biggest problems is relationships in the community. So when I'm talking about black people, I mean, don't get offended or don't try to say maybe I'm racist or something. I'm just keeping the G. We have our problem and we always trying to solve it ourselves. So when I'm talking about our race, just be fine with it. Guys, that brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed the content, make sure you're checking out Kevin Samuels' original channel on YouTube. He got amazing content there. Guys, if you enjoy the content, like, subscribe to the channel, comment. Catch you in the next episode. I'm out. Peace.